Hey everybody, it's Olivia here with the Tennessee Conservative to bring you this week's Big 7 update. We've got some AI bills, some Second Amendment stuff, illegal immigration as always. But before we dive into all that, I just want to remind you, if you're not already, be sure to subscribe to our free daily e-newsletter. It shows up in your inbox every day, chock full of all sorts of news, call to actions, all sorts of stuff that you don't want to miss out on. So be sure that you are signed up for that. If you're not, you can text news, NEWS, to 423-205-5600. Boom. Easy as that. You can be done with that before I'm done with the sentence. So get on that if you are not already subscribed to the newsletter. Also, be sure to follow us on all the social media pages: X, Truth, Getter, Gab, Rumble, MeWe, Parler. If it's out there, we're on it. You should be too. So come and find us because you don't want to miss what's going down in the volunteer state. Now, that being said, let's dive into the good stuff. First up, we have a bill which would require AI data centers to pay for themselves. This is a really good one. I like this one. It's a new piece of legislation filed by Senator Brent Taylor and Rep. Ed Butler, which would not only require AI data centers to pay for their own infrastructure and improvements, but would also block local power companies from raising rates due to the additional strain that these centers put on the power grid. So this would require the owners of the data centers, whether it's a new one or an existing one that's looking to expand or upgrade or whatever, to pay for the full cost of any infrastructure needed to support the data center, including expansions or upgrades to facility infrastructure or utility infrastructure necessary to support the center itself and continue providing the same services to the utility's existing customers. So they can't suck power away from already existing customers, and they have to pay for everything themselves. Another thing I like about this bill is that it specifically prevents the AI companies from offloading the cost by stating very clearly that the owners of the data center are the only one who can pay for this. So they can't enter into a contract with a local government or a state or utility company and try and share the cost, as it were. Additionally, the bill also creates protections for utility ratepayers by ensuring electric companies cannot raise rates charged to any residential, industrial, or commercial customer due to increased electric demand from a data center. And those electric companies, before they propose any future rate hikes, would also have to publish a public report that certifies that the new rate increases are not based off of any AI data center. So this is a really great bill. Um, it's we're seeing a lot of AI regulation come down the pipe this year as lawmakers are really trying to protect human rights, but also, not stifle technological innovation and all sorts of stuff. So really great bill, really good idea. Seems very common sense to me, at least, but we all know that common sense is not so common these days. It seems to be my theme for the week. So we'll see, hopefully get some good action on that one. Another artificial intelligence bill would declare that AI cannot be considered life. This is super critical and I think super important. So, this bill came out of response to growing concerns about the continued rapid expansion of AI into what has been traditionally the human sector. So, these two GOP lawmakers have filed a bill which would dictate that AI could not be considered a person in Tennessee. Sponsored by Senator Mark Pody and Rep. Michelle Renaud, the legislation would deliberately exclude AI from the definition of person in Tennessee state statutes. And it would also clearly define human being, life, and natural person to not include any type of machine, including AI, algorithms, computer programs, computer hardware, all that stuff. That would make sure that AI is completely excluded from any of these definitions that might give AI some kind of human right or human abilities or privileges or anything like that. Rep. Renaud said in just the last 12 months, AI has advanced at a breathtaking pace, from chatbots now appearing on ballots. Okay, what? To companies exploring AI CEOs. That's wild. We have also seen heartbreaking incidents where people formed intense emotional attachments to AI with tragic outcomes, including suicide or unhealthy relationships. This legislation draws clear legal boundaries to protect inalienable rights that belong to humans, not databases, computers, or artificial intelligence. Very key. There's actually another bill dealing with AI that's already working its way through the legislature right now that would make sure that AI cannot form those human attachments to hopefully prevent some of these things that Rep. Renaud talked about, which are very tragic. People are depending on these people to or these machines, they end up replacing human interaction and human relationships, which we know is not healthy. So it's good to get some regulation on that, make sure that we are not treating machines or computers as people. Senator Pody, who is passionate about clearly defining life to not only exclude technology, but also include unborn children, a distinction which you think would be included in the definition already, but isn't. So it's great that that's going to be in there as well. Said, as AI continues to develop, states have a responsibility to clearly define what life actually is. Absolutely. This legislation helps draw an important line between man-made systems, artificial intelligence, and God-created life. Setting these distinctions now while AI is still in its infancy protects human dignity and ensures innovation serves people, not replaces or redefines them. Excellent bill. I look forward to that one getting passed. Hopefully won't see too much pushback on that. So 2 really great AI bills amongst several other really strong AI regulations that are coming down. So we'll keep our eyes on those. Next up, a bill securing the Second Amendment rights for renters is slated to be heard in the Senate for a full vote. So this legislation was brought by Senator Bobby Harshbarger, which basically says you can't, as um, a, a landlord, deny the Second Amendment rights of your tenants. So it states that a landlord shall not prohibit a tenant or their guests from lawfully possessing, carrying, transporting, or storing a firearm, any part of a firearm, or firearm ammunition in a tenant's dwelling unit or premises. Just reiterating that just because you're not a homeowner doesn't mean you have to give up your Second Amendment rights. Those 2 things are not, they're not mutually exclusive. So kind of sad that we need to put this into writing, but there has been pushback, and apparently this has been an issue where lease terms have prohibited people from lawfully exerting their constitutional rights. So hopefully we'll get that fixed. Flew through the Senate committee process. Only pushback were from Democrats, not a surprise. So I think we can hopefully say confidently that this one will make it through the Senate without too many problems. The House version of the bill is trucking along, but since everything got canceled this past week for the weather, a bunch of hearings were canceled, so that'll be rescheduled and reset, I'm sure. But until then, we look forward to seeing the Senate take some good action on the Second Amendment. Moving right along here, Tennessee K-12 Nutrition Task Force would be established by a new bill. This is a really interesting one. This one is by Senator Janice Bowling and Representative Lee Reeves to establish a special task force which would evaluate the prevalence of ultra-processed foods and other harmful substances like chemicals, chemical additives, preservatives, artificial colors, those kinds of things. Not only evaluate the prevalence of these ultra-processed foods, but also their potential health effects on children. So basically, we're going to take a look at what are our kids in school actually being fed and how is this affecting their health. I think we can all maybe extrapolate the conclusions that will come out of that task force, but it's good to have it in writing. And also this task force will be required to present some actionable items that the legislature can take to adjust and push more of a whole foods healthy, actually healthy diet. So great thing. Basically, it would be kind of hot in the pan flash. The task force would have only until December 1st of this year, 2026, to report their findings. And then the task force would be dissolved by January of 2027. So this is really about going in, putting kind of actions to things that we're already seeing through the research and some other things, and then developing some actual steps that the legislature can take to make these changes in the school. So not a bad thing. We definitely want our kids eating healthy as much as possible. Who doesn't want healthier kids, right? It's a problem. It's an epidemic. We know that. So it's great to see that these senators and representatives are taking some action on that front.
Guys, if you want us to keep doing this, do go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com/support. You can mail your checks to P.O. Box 625, Signal Mountain, Tennessee 37377. We appreciate it. Ain't been a lot in the mailbox here lately. A couple of cobwebs in there. I thought I saw a tumbleweed the other day. But um, but nonetheless, you can do that. We'll give you a proud Tennessee conservative koozie, tumbler, directory of your elected officials if you get $50 or more, or a recurring donation of $10 or more. We'd appreciate it.
Tennessee contractors charged with conspiracy to harbor illegal aliens for financial gain and forcibly impede ICE. Yeah, I mean, what doesn't that say other than jail time, right? That should be the least of what's happening on here. So, multi-count indictment has been unsealed that charges Tyler Shane Wells of Morristown and Alexander Benia Servin of Smyrna and they conspired to conceal and harbor illegal aliens for the purpose of commercial advantage and private financial gain. That new offense was created last year as part of the immigration omnibus bills that were going through the legislature. So part of the like human smuggling bill that was passed. So we're seeing that one right into action already, which is great. They were charged with forcibly impeding federal agents while engaged in the performance of official duties. Don't get in the way of law enforcement when they're doing their job. And prevent by force, intimidation, or threat federal agents from discharging their official duties. All of these are in violation of federal law. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of these people think that they're taking their right to peaceably assemble and protest, and they're crossing the line into impeding law enforcement from doing their duties, which is not a constitutional right. So very unfortunate that these individuals made that decision, but how great that we finally have some state laws that'll crack down on this kind of stuff. So Benia Servin, who is 18 years old, is separately charged with forcibly impeding federal agents engaged in the performance of their official duties by utilizing an SUV to strike into the vehicle occupied by the agents. Don't just no. There's a very simple way to avoid any of these kinds of charges. Don't ram federal agents in their vehicle with your vehicle. That's pretty straightforward. Again, violation of federal law, no kidding. Wells appeared in court on January 23rd and entered a plea of not guilty, to the charges in the indictment. Trial date set for March 31st. So hopefully that won't be a long jury deliberation, but due process is due process, so they'll get their trial and we'll go from there. According to filed court documents, both agreed that Benia Servin would drive his GMC Sierra quad cab pickup truck to a nearby location to conduct counter surveillance against the federal agents who were surveilling the construction site. So they were doing counter surveillance, then coming back and reporting. They would then position vehicles to directly impede the line of sight of the federal agents, which obviously culminated then in ramming them with a personal vehicle. So, just don't. Again, not really much else to say besides no, don't do that. So it's really easy to stay out of jail when you don't do things like that. All right, next on the list, we've got a bill which would create a Charlie Kirk Memorial Courtyard for civil debate on the campus at every public university in Tennessee. We've got quite a slate of Charlie Kirk legislation coming down the pipe this session. That's not a real surprise. A couple of them are resolutions just seeking to honor the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk, which is great, but a couple bills actually are attempting to make some changes and be productive within the principles that Charlie stood for. So this is one of those bills. According to the text on the pair of bills, one by Senator Mark Pody, the other by Representative Monty Fritz, the Board of Regents, each state university board, and the Board of Trustees for the University of Tennessee system would be responsible for the creation and maintenance of the courtyard on the main campus of each public institution of higher education to remind students, faculty, staff, and visitors of the value of civil discourse and to encourage those who visit the courtyard to exchange differing ideas and opinions with civility and respect. Great. What? Yeah, absolutely. The legislation lays out specifications for the courtyard size and then includes a requirement for the courtyard to display in decent sizes the Declaration of Rights in Article 1 of the Tennessee Constitution, the Ten Commandments, the regular Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, one on each side of the courtyard. So you're surrounded by these documents that reaffirm all of our rights and all of those things that Charlie advocated for and worked so hard to teach people about. So really interesting way to honor Charlie's legacy and hopefully set the stage for actual debate and conversation and not some of this just madhouse nonsense that continues to take place in the wake of his assassination. Other instructions are listed for the display, along with requirements that they be constructed to withstand weather conditions and include the date of Kirk's death. The proposed legislation would allow the use of gifts, donations, grants, property, and services for the purposes of designing, installing, and maintaining the courtyard, which would be required to be installed on each campus and open to students, faculty, and staff visitors by December 31st of this year. So I'm sure we'll see some pushback on that, primarily from the Democrats. Why you don't want a courtyard that memorializes someone who stood for the epitome of free speech is beyond me. But I'm sure there will unfortunately be pushback on that. Hopefully our Republican supermajority can unify behind this at least and get this passed through. So that's a good one. All right, people. And last on the list here, Tennessee political party registration bill delayed in favor of stronger bill. Yes. A lot of you have been asking us about this. Thanks for keeping on it. Thanks for making sure you guys have all of the right information. So last week we published a story or an article about HB 1159 being taken off notice. That was the bill that would require party registration for all elections. When you go to register to vote, you have to pick an actual party or be declared unaffiliated or that kind of thing. So that bill was taken off notice by bill sponsor Susan Lynn, but we received some additional communication from her after she finally got back to us on some of that talked about her reasoning and logic for doing that. So this bill was set to be heard by the House subcommittee. She pulled it off of notice in favor of a similar bill that's being run by Representative Chris Todd. Now, this is HB 0886. So Rep. Todd's bill would also require party registration, but individuals would have to provide 90 days notice in writing to change one's party affiliation after their initial registration. It also states that the party with whom the individual registers must match the party for which the individual requests a primary ballot, right? So if you're registered as a Republican, you have to take a Republican ballot. Rep. Lynn said that she's pulling this in hopes because Senator Todd's bill is making, or Rep. Todd, his bill is actually making some progress. The Senate companion to Rep. Todd's bill we thought was dead, but we were informed that just because a bill does not receive a second in the Senate does not mean that it is killed. That's not the same for the House, but that's different information than we had before. So she's graciously pulled her bill so that we can all unify and rally behind Rep. Todd's bill, hopefully get that passed through. If that one will not go through for some reason, she said she's going to put hers back on notice for consideration. Constituents are urged to contact members of the Senate, State, and Local Government Committee and Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally to politely encourage them in supporting Rep. Todd's bill. So the Senate companion on that is SB 0777. So those go hand in hand. Hopefully we'll see that. I will point out that it is not, neither of these bills really have more enforcement mechanisms to the closed primary situation. So as of right now in Tennessee, it is already illegal to crossover vote. We don't have any enforcement mechanisms on this. These bills might help close the primary a little bit because at least we're requiring party registration. So you shouldn't be able to walk up as a Democrat and say, I'd like to pull a Republican ballot. It helps a little. Neither of them really have any teeth to say like what happens if you change your party registration simply to try and vote in the other party's primary and then change back. There's no enforcement, but at least it's a step in the right direction. So that's a good thing. We want to thank our lawmakers for hearing the continued pleas of the conservative grassroots and Republicans who want only Republicans to be able to select Republican candidates. Again, common sense, but here we are. So make sure you're contacting Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally and those Senate committee members to just politely and encouragingly ask them to support these measures to close the primaries. And that, my friends, is your Big 7. You did it. You hung in there. We had some really great stuff this week. As always, be sure to keep up, like I said, with the socials and our daily newsletter so that you don't miss any of these calls to actions. We've been very effective in those, and especially in tandem with all the other grassroots and conservative organizations out there. We are all trying to keep our legislators accountable. This is our busiest time of the year. This is when we really jump into action and are making sure that we have all of that information for you guys as quickly and as currently as possible. So if you appreciate that we're doing, if you find that helpful, we would really appreciate any contribution that you guys can make because we can't do this without you. We're all a team. We got to get it together. So we appreciate your time, your treasure, and your talent. And as always, all of your support for those of us here at the Tennessee Conservative. Stay warm, stay safe, and we will see you next week with all new news right there in your inbox.